College football nerds here talking Georgia and Auburn. And y'all, we have got actual football games to preview. Having seen actual football played, and y'all don't know for us how big a deal that is. Doing previews, team previews, and game previews in the era of COVID was a lot for us. So a couple of things. First, in the comments, we want you to give us your score prediction. It creates a great conversation for us and for others, so we encourage you to do that every single video we have. Also, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. It helps the channel out a lot. And finally, if you like what we're talking about enough, maybe share it on your home forum or Facebook. It'll help us out as well. All right, let's get into business. Josh, this Saturday, we saw a lot of crazy. And, you know, Georgia fans, Auburn fans, their takeaway from this Saturday may not be, hey, I'm super excited about what I saw because there were a lot of warts. It's understandable given COVID and teams missing all kinds of practice. Could be worse. They could be Oklahoma this week. They could be Texas this week, having given up 56 to somebody. They could be LSU, having given up records to Mississippi State, but they're not. Two teams with multi-touchdown wins where it wasn't looking great early. And what we saw from this and what you mentioned on Twitter was basically the defenses for both of these teams, and specifically I think you're talking about Auburn at this point, they were good enough to hold serve while the offense figured it out. And while the other team waited for the other team to make enough mistakes to bury themselves. And that's what Georgia did. That's what Auburn did. And it worked because both of these teams had good defenses. And we'll talk about how Auburn's defense really impressed us more than we expected. We thought we had some concerns there. But first, let's talk Auburn, Kentucky, and maybe unpack what you saw there, maybe build on kind of the open here and talk about what you saw.
As you said, the takeaway I had, and we mix up on Twitter a lot, and I joke, and of course it's true, right, that all the good tweets are mine and all the bad tweets are Daniel's. But I tweeted out at one point that you've got to give credit to Auburn for the fact that they basically leaned on their defense for most of this game and sort of waited for the game to come to them. So the game's 29-13. Realize when you went into the fourth quarter, this was actually a 15-13 game, and it seemed pretty close. Now, Auburn, weirdly, even though, the stats didn't necessarily show it, it kind of felt like they were somewhat in control. And the reason for that was that the defense was playing a good game and wasn't allowing a whole lot to go on. The leading rusher for Kentucky was Smoke, who only had 7 carries, and that was mostly because he had one 35-yard carry. But Rose, who was the primary back, had 3 yards per carry. Wilson ran the ball quite a bit. He had 13 carries in the game, but he only had 42 yards, 3 yards per carry. Wilson had almost no success. He threw 37 passes and only for 6.5 yards per attempt. So really, all across the board, Kentucky was ineffective offensively. They were the entire game. And I'm not sure if the front from Auburn is quite what it was last year. I don't think it's reasonable to expect it to be. Anybody that loses, like a top 5 kind of pick, especially in the interior defensive line, those guys are rare, and you're just not generally going to be able to replace that with the same level of production. But the linebacking core, if it's not the best in the conference, it's very easily part of that discussion. The secondary, I thought, looked good for the most part. There were some times where there were some hiccups, but that's to be expected in COVID era. For the most part, they, again, 6.5 yards per carry, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, or 6 yards per attempt, I should say. They had a really good day against Wilson and didn't give up a whole heck of a lot. But I think the most important thing, Auburn looked sound and well coached pretty much throughout the entire game. When opportunities arose, like, they run a zone read, they're in position to make the tackle for Wilson, and he makes a mistake and they capitalize. When Kentucky decides to run the next series, a fake punt, Auburn's players were in position to make the tackle, and there were like 4 guys that could have tackled Duffy on that play. So it's easy to say, well, Kentucky, they threw the game away to Auburn. I think, like a lot of things with Auburn and the way their team is run, defensively, that it's easy to say that, but Auburn's defense is set up and their special teams are set up that they capitalize when they get those opportunities. That's an issue of execution and coaching. That's not just a pure luck thing. The kick 6 happened, not just pure luck from Auburn. Yeah, the guy has to miss the field goal, but 1, you make him kick a long field goal, and 2, you put a great returner back there and you have a plan for him to return the kick. So that's kind of what I see from Auburn, and what kept them in that game and allowed them to win it at the end is, I don't even want to say opportunistic. I mean, they're well coached and they're sound. And when you make a mistake, they pounce on it, and they tend to blow open games that are otherwise close.
Yeah, and the ghost fumble that happened, it was a gift. Let's be honest, it was a gift. Gave them a short field that they scored on. That doesn't necessarily happen a lot, where it's a non-contact fumble, but that was a 3rd and 5 play that got blown up at the line, and had he not fumbled, they'd be punting the ball. So it's like we see the ghost fumble, and we're like, oh, lucky Auburn, the guy didn't get touched and he fumbled the ball, but he was doing a spin move because the guy set the edge and was ready to tackle him. And so, like you said, all those things happened. It's a confluence of things that if they don't get the ultimate prize of the fumble right there, they still get the ball. So we can't forget that. All right, Georgia, look, offensively, I think it was a disaster for a half. It's pretty obvious. But what did we say coming into the season? Regardless of what happens offensively, defensively, we know they're going to keep them in every single game. That's either against bad teams when things aren't going well, like Arkansas, or the elite of the elite. They're going to be on the field with all of them. This game came out, I think, Georgia 7.5 point favorite, which I think is really high. But I also think that's a little bit of confidence that Vegas has in Georgia in terms of being able to do anything they want to do defensively. My concern a little bit, obviously, is the offensive side of the ball. Is there any way that we can look at this game against Arkansas and say, okay, Stetson comes in, stabilizes the offense, and they look pretty good? When you're looking at this, Josh, is it they look pretty good because they brought in a new quarterback and they were playing Arkansas, and now they're playing Auburn and they need to worry? Or did they really find something on offense that they can bring to the next week?
So, the first thing I want to point out is that Georgia did the same thing as Auburn, right? I mean, you can say, like, Arkansas was up 7-5, but they were up 7-5 because Arkansas has Felipe Franks, and just like he did at Florida, he's not a great quarterback, but sometimes he flashes. And he rolled out of the pocket, made a good athletic play, made a good throw on the run, and they scored 1 touchdown. Otherwise, they pretty much shut him down the entire game. 5.6 yards per attempt, 2.8 yards per carry, nothing happens. But it just took a long time for Georgia to get going offensively. And Bennett didn't have a fantastic day, but he had a 7.3 yard per attempt day. It's easy to say it's the same situation as Auburn, right? Where they kind of held pat, they waited for things to come around. I'm going to be honest, I don't think it really is. Because Bo Nix had 8.6 yards per attempt, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions against Kentucky. He had a solid day. He only threw 27 passes. Auburn as a team only ran 57 offensive plays. You have to keep that in mind. It was a shortened game. And for various reasons, they didn't get nearly as many snaps. There were 78 snaps for Kentucky and only 57 for Auburn. But, like Shivers had about 5 yards per carry. Nix actually had 7 yards per carry on a number of carries. Georgia didn't have any sort of bright spots like that, really. I mean, they had 5.5 yards per carry for Zamir White. 7.3 yards per attempt for Bennett was good. 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Obviously, let's not even talk about Mathis. That's all fine and dandy, but you've got to look at it through the lens of who they were playing. Kentucky, total defense last year, was a good defense. I mean, they were 9th in the conference in yards per play, but in particular, Kentucky was 4th in the conference in pass defense. Arkansas was bad across the board. I mean, they were right there, almost tied with Vanderbilt, 13 in the SEC, 6.54 yards per play allowed. And I'll tell you the most concerning thing for me, and if you're Georgia, it's the run game. Because Arkansas last year was a 5.5 yard per carry allowed team. And I know they've got a JUCO transfer. I know they got Xavier Kelly from Clemson. But that was a bad run defense. And I really expected in this game that Georgia, it didn't matter who the quarterback was. When the defense held pat, eventually the dam was going to break and Georgia was just going to run all over Arkansas. Because that's what happened to Arkansas almost all season last year. And the fact that it didn't is concerning. I mean, Zamir White had a good day, 5.5 yards per carry, but that's not a fantastic one. James Cook was not very effective at all, 3.7 yards per carry. Really, none of the other backs were effective particularly either. And again, you had, as a team, 2.9 yards per carry against a defense that allowed 5.5 yards per carry last season. Georgia has leaned on the run game. Their offense is designed to lean on the run game. They got something going with Bennett, but they got something going against a team that is just bad against the run and the pass. Auburn generated something against a reasonably good defense, and you can understand the strategy. But with Georgia, they should have taken over the game pretty much from the start just on the run. And that's what really leads me to concerns, because I do think Georgia's defense is better than Auburn's, frankly. I'll go ahead and throw that out there. They're elite. But if they're that incapable of running the ball against even a bad offensive unit, I'm really worried how they're going to handle something like a Auburn defensive front and defensive football team that's a heck of a lot better than Arkansas.
All right, so now I want to talk about matchups. We saw what we saw Saturday, and we know kind of what to expect this coming Saturday in this game, but I want to talk about where teams have advantages. And I'll go first. I think it's clear that neither one of these offenses are going to have an advantage or leverage over the other. And when we do matchups, generally we say, offensive line or run game versus defensive, run defense. Instead of saying, okay, this run game is better than that run game, because they're not playing each other. But in this case, I do want to do that because both defenses are good and both offenses have real big question marks. For me, I didn't love what I saw from Auburn running the ball Saturday, but Kentucky also has a good front seven. So I'm going to say Auburn has an advantage in running the ball, or will have an advantage running the ball Saturday based on what I saw from these two teams. I think Georgia's run defense is going to be excellent, but Auburn's run defense is far better than Arkansas, and Georgia's struggling to run the ball really concerned me. I also think that Bo Nix is going to be better at quarterback enough to keep the defense honest, to allow them to at least run a little bit. I expect a little more from Williams, but I also expect more from guys like Zamir White. So for me, I'm going to say my one advantage for Auburn in this game is going to be the run game. Give me an advantage you have for Georgia over Auburn in this game that could determine the outcome.
I think Georgia's biggest advantage in this game is the ability to generate havoc with their defense. Auburn this year, on the defensive side of the ball, they've got a good linebacking core. I think the secondary is going to be pretty good, but they're not quite there yet. I know McCreary had a really good day, but particularly in the edges, I think Moultrie is a great guy, don't get me wrong, but they don't have there's not a co, much less the kind of guys they've had in the past. Big Camp Bryant is a good player, but he's not an elite player. He's certainly not someone that can, push the pocket the way they could with Derek Brown up the interior. I don't know how much disruption they will get necessarily. They're going to kind of sit back and wait for Georgia to make a mistake, and only then will they capitalize like they did with Kentucky. I don't think Georgia is as apt to shoot themselves in the foot as Kentucky is. Georgia, on the other hand, is very disruptive. I mean, they've got players like Nolan Smith on the edge. They've got a tremendous amount of talent. Guys like Nakobe Dean are quickly coming on. There's LeCount, there's Walker, there's Monty Rice. I mean, they're stacked with talent across the board. They will generate negative plays defensively in affirmative sense. So to me, that's where I think the advantage is more. Auburn has always been a lot of razzle-dazzle, but this year, as much as the run game was good, Auburn, I think, was also non-traditional. And I think you'd have to give credit to that as well. Like, DJ Williams was not effective. He was 2.6 yards per carry. Their best player really was Sean Shivers, and he's more of a quick, explosive guy, really powerful for his size, but I don't think that plays well against Georgia's speed and athleticism. I think Auburn's normal razzle-dazzle offense, throwing the ball up to, Seth Williams, which was really effective against Kentucky, may not work as well against a Georgia team that can rush the passer a lot better and not give you time for those. And misdirection plays and whatnot are also plays that are a lot more, susceptible to fast, explosive players shooting a gap and blowing it up in the backfield. So I'd say that's where really Georgia probably has the single largest advantage over what Auburn can do in this game.
All right, so let's go ahead and give our picks here. Sometimes the conversation is interesting when we give our picks earlier in the show. I've actually got Auburn in this game. I cannot believe this line is 7.5, given the concerns that Georgia has offensively. I don't normally go this hard against Vegas, but I'm doing it here. And for me, the big reason why I'm doing it is for all the criticism that Bo Nix has taken from us, and I think it's been warranted. I think it's proven out. It proved out even Saturday. Bo Nix has seen fast defense. He's seen Georgia at their best, and he saw Alabama. Granted, they weren't that great defensively when they saw Auburn last year, but he's seen SEC defenses. Whoever Georgia puts out there at quarterback Saturday will not have yet really seen an SEC defense as a starter. Arkansas is not an SEC defense. Arkansas is bad, real bad. I think it's going to be a shock for both teams to play the other defense, and I think Georgia's defense is better than Auburn's. But I think that experience and the ability to flash a vertical pass here and there that can either score or extend a drive, I think that's a credit to Bo Nix. And I already said that I think Auburn's run game is going to be a little bit better than Georgia's, which there's no reason why it should be. Georgia should be running all over people. And I think Bo Nix is going to be able to keep that Georgia defense more honest than a Georgia quarterback is the Auburn defense. They're going to be able to sell out for the run and force the quarterback to beat them. I've got an ugly score on this one, 19-16 Auburn Tigers. Josh, give me your score.
So for the second time today, mine's extremely similar. I also have Auburn, and I've got them 17-14. If you were to ask me to give a confidence level out of 10, it'd be a 2. We talk about this a lot. Anytime we're picking a game under 20 points, stuff gets weird. Any team can win, and it's going to be, like the Kentucky game where the Auburn player takes the ball and runs it, the pick six that gets called back. Those kinds of plays will win an entire game when the score's under 20 points, because one 14-point swing is as much as a team is going to generate. I think we're in that kind of game. And so one team can be, let's say Georgia is 30% better than Auburn. That won't really matter if Auburn hits a couple plays and Georgia doesn't. And that's, to me, that's the problem. Is I think Georgia is 20-30% better than Auburn, frankly. They're a more talented roster than Auburn. The defense is a little better than Auburn. That is not a slight against Auburn. Georgia was by far statistically the best defense in the conference last year. And they brought a lot of guys back, and I still think they're excellent. But the fact that they could not run the ball very successfully against a very bad defense is really concerning, because Auburn is a whole other level. And like you said, I don't know if it's going to be Mathis, Bennett, what the heck's going to go on at quarterback. By the way, if it's JT Daniels, you can throw out this entire prediction. But assuming it's not JT Daniels, they're going to be trying to get this settled midweek, putting a guy in. He's going to be his first real start in a real live matters environment in the SEC. And I think there's going to be some shell shock there, because as Auburn's going to throw a lot of things at him that he hasn't seen before at a speed that he hasn't seen at a completely different level than what he saw from Arkansas. And given that Arkansas actually generated some pass rush, that is not encouraging, given, I said that Auburn's pass rush isn't quite what it has been the past couple of years, but it's still good, and it's still better than Arkansas, I'm willing to bet. And on the other side, to your point, like if you look at Bo Nix's stat line, even in that Alabama game where they put up 48 points in that game, he's 15 of 30, 50% passing, 5.8 yards per attempt. Those are not good on paper numbers. But I think what that belies is he scrambled for some third downs when it was very important. He threw a couple clutch passes, and he did the same thing against Kentucky, throwing a strike to Seth Williams. That's what I think lets Auburn win this game. They're going to be outplayed for a lot of the game, and it's not going to matter because they're going to hit a couple plays when it does matter. And I say a lot that Auburn is good at generating what a lot of people call cheap points as a function of their offense, and they're not cheap. It's what they're designed to do. I think Auburn finds a way to get a couple touchdowns on the board like that, even though they're generally not working and getting shut down. And if they could just get 2 touchdowns on the board with, one pass to Williams and another turnover, short yardage situation, and they're very good in those situations at converting it into touchdowns, I think that's enough for them to win the game. Both defenses here, both defenses are good enough to win a game for the respective team, but that can't hold out forever. Somebody has to win the game. In that situation, I think Auburn finds a way to win. Again, a lot like Kentucky, and I'll make the point. Kentucky outgained Auburn 380 yards to 320 and lost by 16. I think Georgia is probably going to outgain Auburn in this game, and I think Georgia is going to lose despite it.
So we're both picking Auburn here. And I think one of the points you made about it being a shell shock situation, if you think about, and we're talking about Georgia here, so this is a good example. Georgia's defense was shell shocked against Baker Mayfield in Oklahoma in 2017. But Georgia was veteran enough and talented enough across the board to dig themselves out of a hole and come back and win. When you're in a game that might be a 1916 kind of score and you're shell-shocked early and you don't have an offense that can dig itself out of a hole, those shell-shock plays that might be a fumble or a bunch of 3-and-outs that give them a super short field and an easy score that they wouldn't have otherwise earned because your defense is that good, like you said, when a score is this low, that's the difference in the game. And so that's something that we've got to consider is, if this is a below 20-point game and they shell shock him into, and I've said that a lot now, a bad pick six, that's it. It's over. That's the game. You're not digging out of that hole. So that's something to consider. But let's say that we wake up Sunday morning, Georgia won this game. Will it be because they got really good quarterback play? Will it be because Auburn was just incompetent offensively? Or will it be because Georgia's run game stepped up? You can only pick one.
I thought I had the answer to this question until you said you can only pick one. If they win this game, it's going to be because Georgia is able to consistently rush the passer. I think the thing that, Bo Nix, we talked about it a lot. I know we're picking Auburn in this game. I feel like I can go back and be a little critical. Bo Nix was a 6.7 yard per attempt passer last year. He did not have good statistical numbers against any significant competition. If Bo Nix is really pressured like he was in the Georgia game last year, they're not going to win. I mean, he's 4.9 yards per attempt. He had 245 yards passing, but he did it on 50 attempts. And they still only scored 14 points. I think they can force Nix to create some negative plays if they can rush the passer, if they can get him throwing the ball, and generate a couple havoc plays. And that's all it's going to take is one interception on the wrong side of the field to win it. So I do think that's going to be the key, is if they're able to generate a turnover or a takeaway. If Nix is able to do conversely, basically, if Nix is able to have a clean game, then I think Auburn stands a good chance of winning.
All right, y'all, that's it for Auburn and Georgia. Let us know in the comments what you think this game is going to turn out. Looking like a close game either way, so let us know what you think. Also, keep an eye out. We're going to do a top 10 this week, and we're going to talk a little bit about what happened with LSU and Oklahoma over the weekend. So if you want to continue to listen to us ramble about college football and you got nothing else to do because you're working from home and you're not paying attention to those Zoom meetings, check us out. Look for our top 10, and there's also an Alabama A&M preview coming, but you probably don't care about that. Thanks so much, y'all. Have a great week, and God bless.